everybody. Welcome to the last session of Cloud IT Live. I'm really excited for this session. We have a great panel today. We have Colin McCarthy on the left of the Dream Team screen over in the BuzzFeed office. He works at Essence Digital. We have Justine in the middle, who actually works at BuzzFeed, so we're not just taking up space in the office. And then we have Tim over on the right, who works at Better Cloud. The Lone Ranger up in Washington State is Dave Kaminsky from Cumulo. So I will kind of get off of this webinar and just let them take it from here. So Tim, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, good afternoon everybody. Welcome to the last session of Cloud IT Live. Thanks so much for sticking with us this afternoon. I'm here with not only colleagues but friends. And basically we're here to talk about all the other sessions, provide some commentary, and in the GoToMeeting window, feel free to ask us questions, and we're just going to surface some questions as they come through the next hour. But, I guess first off, the first panel, automation, the history of automation and whether it's actually going to put us out of jobs. I'm really curious to see from you guys what you thought of his presentation and, where you think automation is going to take your job or lack of a job.
I'll start down this end. I think as a recap and a history lesson, it was very interesting, to sort of go through all of that. I guess the start of the Industrial Revolution and, people coming in from the fields and into the cities. And automation did, with the Industrial Revolution, create a lot of jobs, create a lot of millionaires, create all of the railroads and the automobile industry and all of our manufacturing. Personally, there's a lot of automation in the consumer world that I don't like. The automated, checkout machines, they're not creating jobs, they're taking away jobs. But the part going into IT management, we need to be automating a lot of things to say, as a business, more mobile, more secure, and more cutting edge.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an interesting question. Things have accelerated so much in the last even 5 years that I personally find it very difficult to say what my job is going to look like in 2 years, let alone 5. It feels like we've been kind of like just thrown through the washing machine. We're on spin cycle right now, and no one really has any clue how it's going to end. Justine, what do you, BuzzFeed, obviously such a digitally aware, just like technologically enabled organization. What do you see changing for you guys in the next couple of years?
Everything, probably. Honestly, I've been at the company for 3 years, and not only has the nature of our business, but the nature of how I support the business, it's changed probably every 6 months because we have new initiatives coming out, new things that people want to focus on, and also new software that they want to try and use, and new hardware, frankly. So my answer is everything.
And also, I'm guessing, new locations.
New locations.
With a growing business, your BuzzFeed have opened up, I've seen all over the world, we've opened up a lot of places, a lot of offices, and part of that automation and, provisioning new systems, provisioning users, deprovisioning users, automating your workflow, just makes that expansion so much, manageable, palatable. There's still a lot of things that you can't automate because you are dealing with third-party carriers and landlords and cable installers.
And countries that won't accept shipments from other countries, for example.
Countries that don't have Amazon, which was our, in one APAC country, was our biggest struggle because we were so used to, you need something, do a quick Amazon order.
I'm so guilty of that.
Our Amazon order is so automated, 2-3 clicks, you can do 1 click, but I don't enable that just because I need to check the delivery location.
What about you, Dave?
So I'm going to be completely greedy and selfish on this one and hope that we all get automated out of work. And I mean everyone on the planet. I think that would be the best thing for everyone if we just all had an opportunity to go to the beach every day. We'd be bored after a while, but our volleyball would be great. The reality is we live in the period of software-defined fill in the blank. Software-defined cloud, software-defined storage, software-defined networks, and that's only manageable with automation. So how do I see that changing? In the storage space, automation's already in play, but it's going to get more aggressively implemented over the next 2 years. And really what that's going to mean is setting up some good guidelines for how you automate your storage, your network, things of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, Dave, back in the day for those like big enterprise SANs, you had an entire team managing them, and they might have been manually tiering the storage, manually following up by department or by group. Oh, you guys are almost at your quota. You guys, oh, you need more IOPS? Okay, we're going to burst you up a tier, all of that. What's happened to that team? How have they been automated?
So this half, and half of that is the team now. So really, the automation component is critical, and as we've moved away from the era of the SAN and storage to the scale-out NAS, it's changed significantly. Now storage systems have APIs. 10 years ago, they did not. No one thought about really implementing APIs for a commodity storage appliance or SAN. Maybe a few here and there had it. But really, in my industry now, it's much easier to be a storage admin because of automation and logic and rules around this project or these worker nodes or these users. They get bumped up as needed when they hit this threshold. There's no more manually saying, Tim's machine is critical, move it over to this tier of storage, and that is a godsend.
So, I mean, the APIs is a great point. I know, at least speaking for myself, whenever I'm evaluating any new service, especially a cloud service, but even on-prem services, because we do look at them, even though at least Better Cloud is very cloud first. One of my biggest decision factors is the APIs themselves. I always hand it off to my developers, hand it off to my security team. Guys, I want you to take a look at this. How easy would it be to integrate with this? Can we do single sign-on? Can we do OAuth 2? Do we need to do old school SAML? It's something that they're just questions that I wasn't used to asking 5 years ago. How do you guys evaluate APIs and the services behind APIs?
Do you want to go first?
Let me think it over.
Because that was my answer. That's how I was going to. Yeah, we always make sure that there's an easy in and an easy out. And what we're buying, whether it's a cloud service or a box, because we do still have some boxes and we do buy boxes, and we like them to all match if possible, because then all the labels, the logos, the company logos are all on the same size of the chassis, and it looks really cool. We always make sure that there are additional tools, that there is also a development plan, that there is a roadmap that is going to help us to in the future get what we want out of that service and then continue using it. Interesting to say that you use OAuth instead of SAML, consider SAML legacy. I actually prefer SAML because I can turn it on or off in organizational units, and Google are now doing more auditing.
Yeah, they just announced that a couple days ago.
There's no auditing on Google OAuth that I know of, so we have to have a conversation about that afterwards, or a break-off session.
Oh yeah, one of those fun Google feature gaps that we always run into, right? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I will preface this by saying I'm not a developer. I hack together really nasty scripts when I need to, but Bash and Python is my expertise and nothing more. So there are a lot of times where evaluating APIs, I need to throw them over the fence a little bit. And we, at least my company, have a lot of experience working with APIs, not only Google, but Salesforce and Zendesk and Box and Dropbox. And it's really interesting to me just in general with these vendors how the claims for their APIs don't always stack up to the reality of using their APIs.
Or even their claim of being SAML compliant.
Yep.
They might not like or know or understand how to do Google implementations or work with that. So yeah, even though not everything is equal, and you're always going to get that, I guess, two-tiered or maybe even three-tiered approach of how companies are offering it, and whether it's an API that's actively being developed. It might just be they've produced an API and expect everybody else to hack around their bugs, as opposed to proactively improving their API and having additional functions. And as a disclaimer, I know nothing about, I just know the acronym. And I know that people use it a lot. I'm also not a developer.
Yeah, I mean, probably the most technical, honestly, out of us is Dave. I know that you, not to throw you under the bus or anything. What's your experience been like integrating all these enterprise services via API?
So take your worst technology nightmare and then start drinking thinking about it. Because you're talking about an endpoint in you're talking about a source of data or someplace you're passing data to that you only have control that's exposed to you, and you are completely dependent on some level on that service provider. So like in selection processes I've dealt with in the past, things I've looked at for managing that nightmare and like planning for it appropriately, actually looking at the traffic that's being generated when you're placing those calls with a tool like Wireshark or TCP dump. And if they're saying, hey, we wrap all traffic, you better confirm that, because it's on you if you made that call and it turns out, hey, some stuff is being passed in the clear. Response time is a huge, huge thing to keep in mind when looking at API performance. Not picking on Google, other API providers have had these issues in the past where response times were a challenge and they were getting better, but applications on my side of the fence would time out and then replace the same call. So there's a risk of unnecessary calls, things like that, and you want to kind of measure that, because if you're placing a create user, just staying within the Google concept, and it times out on a reply to you but succeeds, and then you issue another create user, you're going to get an error back saying user Bob already exists, and it's not going to jive when you look at logging, depending on how you implement your logging. Some other things to kind of be on the lookout for is not having a REST API is kind of like a bad sign at this point. REST is very well understood. It's fine if your provider has other APIs as well, but you want something that's a little friendlier and easier to use if you're doing in-house development, as opposed to using an outside tool like a Better Cloud or similar.
Yeah, I mean, I know we use one product internally who, I won't mention their name, but they claim to have an API, and the API is the URL that you hit, and you append a token and a start date and an end date, and then it spits out a really terribly formatted CSV file to you, but will only spit out the first 100,000 rows. And so we had to build all of this crazy logic in to do smaller calls first, to figure out how big the time frame is that we can make the call so that we don't exceed 100,000, but that we don't make too many calls so that we get throttled. And with other APIs, when I'm down in Atlanta in our development office, the number of times just walking around with our developers that I hear retry logic and exponential backoff and failure handling, it's something that, if you're just like patching together a quick dirty provisioning script, you're not going to think about it until it breaks, and then when it breaks, it's probably really going to break.
I think they were probably discussing all my open tickets. But yeah, going to the API, I've hit those, doing even a Google Apps migration from one company to another, hit those limits, or trying to do bulk changes on, all of our documents, hit those API limits. So there is that problem. You try and automate, but then, you can only go so fast. And it is, logical that Google and other companies are going to have to impose, speed limits on so their APIs don't get abused. But then the times you need to use them, they need to be robust and actually, execute what you're asking them to do.
Yeah.
It's crazy that you had to hack together a way to segment up your work so that it wouldn't time out on that API.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that, we deal with a lot with our customers and that we hear a lot in general is this fear of automation, right? Back even 5 years ago until, right before I joined Better Cloud, I did a lot of Google Apps migrations, and guaranteed every single time the guy or the team that was the Exchange '07 or 2010 or 13 admin would fight Google Apps tooth and nail. It's not reliable, it's not secure, we can't trust it because it's not behind our firewall, and, we're here, we all run businesses on Google Apps fairly successfully. How much of the fear do you guys feel of the, oh crap, my skills are becoming obsolete and this new thing will actually replace my job function?
Are you fearful for your job, Justine?
I'm not fearful for my job. Are you fearful for your job?
I'm not fearful for my job. I can't tell you where it's going to land. I feel like right now we're just on this crazy, crazy wild ride. And
automated lights. They're going to turn themselves like,
yeah, see, this is the fear of automation. Doesn't understand that we're actually presenting right now.
We got to move our arms more.
they should at least be like sound activated lights rather than just motion sensitive lights.
Yeah, in the Better Cloud office, we have one of the bathroom lights is on a 5-minute timer.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, but that also brings up a good point to begin with, right? Of, there are certain places that automation belongs and certain places that it doesn't. And people can get really overzealous with it and take it too far, no?
Yeah, you've got to, like, having those checks and balances, like, whenever I try any new piece of automation, like, I was looking to make some changes to some Google Drive permissions. And of course, I didn't do a live test on lots of, live documents. I created a test selection of documents, and I tried, what I wanted to do in a policy program, to change those permissions to make sure that it had worked. But if it worked in my trial and then I did a bigger trial, and I've done this before, you can test, but then when you try and put it on a live set of data, especially if it's a large amount, you can end up breaking it, because even the companies that are providing this service, they haven't tried it on 800,000 documents and 600 users. Where do you put those checks to make sure that your system doesn't go crazy? If it is automated, if you have like a deprovisioning workflow and somebody accidentally moves all of your users into the wrong organizational unit, and instead of moving everybody from one office to another, they end up automatically deprovisioning all those accounts. Where is the check that says, hang on a minute, did you really want to suspend 100 accounts?
Yeah, I mean, it goes along with automation in general as a force multiplier, right? And it's a fantastic force multiplier when it's targeted correctly and when it's tested correctly. But when it goes wrong, you're not, misspelling one user's name, you're accidentally deprovisioning 1,000 users at once. I mean, at some point, Dave, you've got to have a story of some sort of automation gone wrong. Probably a good one too, right?
Yeah, so I did a very large Google Apps migration from an email system that I don't mention anymore because it gives me shudders. And it was, I had a provision over 100,000 users. Nothing huge, but we didn't want the Google Apps accounts going live until we were ready to make an official announcement, which is kind of a pain in the posterior. So what we did was, through Bash and an API wrapper, we did, because I didn't know about Better Cloud at the time and other tools like it, wrote a script that would rename the accounts from a name that did not match the email value in Active Directory and in our other directory source. So single logon wouldn't work, single sign-in wouldn't work. And then when we, hey, everyone's live, do the rename. And I forgot to take into account that the business I worked in had people in countries all over the world, and there were a subset of users that had a combination of the letter Q's in their name, and we were using QQ_ space email address. So whenever we hit an email address that had QQ_ and then another QQ, because they couldn't represent their native language, yeah, that rename failed and they could never log in. So you have to really kind of pay attention for these odd edge cases. So whatever your criteria is when you're setting up your automation for getting migrations, like even if it's just checking logs for stuff, you want to assume at some point you're going to come across a valid criteria in a state you never expected or in a representation that you never expected that will cause a failure. So if you could build logic around catching that in your automation, like, hey, there's a log entry I've never ever seen before. Don't have it kick off the first error or warning email or whatever it is. Have it say, new error detected, so you actually know it's something new or a new state or whatever it is. If I had done that with that migration, I would have saved so many tech support calls and headaches for these 5 users out of hundreds of thousands.
But, I mean, in the end...
Yeah, I was going to say, on a failure rate, that's not too bad.
Yeah.
If it was 5 users out of 100,000, that's a success.
Yeah, I mean,
it depends who you ask. Ask those users. That was not successful for them.
It's those edge cases and that exception handling that can really throw you for a loop. You know, I'm scanning through the questions here, and from our good friend Dave Jackson, API equals another problem interface.
Yeah.
I absolutely can relate to that. I'll actually even say that at one point this week, one of the vendors that we work with changed one of the crucial API responses without our knowledge, and our call started failing. And you know, we talked to their support team. They're like, "Oh, what? We didn't tell you? We changed this one parameter." And I think that's one of the things that, you know, just communication with the APIs you're hitting.
Yeah, if they should have, I'm sure they must have internal change management. You'd think they would also have external change management. You know, hey customers, this is what we're changing. You know, you've got a couple of weeks to test your code. You know, make sure it's going to work. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, certain vendors are better about it. Certain aren't as much. But you know, there are certain APIs that I work with that seem to just have the "F it, I'll do it live" kind of mentality. And actually, speaking of that, I saw a couple comments for a live IT troubleshooting. How many IT people does it take to fix video conference? Apparently 3.
I didn't see you guys touching anything. It was all me.
We're here for emotional support, okay?
It's an iPad. I don't know how to use it.
Right, sorry, it's my Chromebox.
So, anyways, we really appreciate patience with that. We are back in the flesh.
I might just have to zoom in, zoom out a little bit. You know, we'll see.
So, we got a great question here from Rachel. You know, how do you guys deal with shadow IT at your respective organizations? Kind of feeding off the guy from the state of Colorado.
Well,
Who wants to go first?
I'll go.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends on what you mean by handling it or dealing with it. So I try to get ahead of it by having very frequent, by very frequent I mean like monthly or every other month, meetings with top stakeholders in the company and just sort of asking them like, what is your department lacking that IT could be doing for you? Like, where are we failing you? What can we be doing better? And I find by having those sorts of meetings, I'm getting ahead of any sort of shadow IT that might be happening behind the scenes because people realize that I'm there for them and that I'm having a conversation. So they tend to email me a lot more often than, you know, say other companies that I've worked at, and they'll be like, we're thinking about replacing this particular software with this other thing. Can we talk through it with you? Can you tell us how you can help us? So that's personally how I try to deal with it.
I mean, the way that I see it at least is, you know, shadow IT is kind of a pressure relief valve for users. It's a warning sign that you're either not providing the right services or you're not providing services in the right manner, that they feel obliged to go out and to expend something or even to pay for something on their own to solve their own business challenges. Just as an example, and I actually wrote a blog post for it for Better Cloud. Before we officially implemented Slack, our developers shadow IT the hell out of Slack. And in one sense, it made it really easy for me to go to management and sell it to them because the value prop was there, the usage was already there, and we had one of those, oh crap, now we need to do compliance on this awesome thing that we're already using kind of moments. It's just crazy to me how these needs come out of the woodwork. And, I think the more shadow IT users feel like they need to do, the worse the communication and I guess in general like the respect for the IT team is, no?
I think it's hard for an IT team to know exactly what tools everybody needs. It was easy back in the day. They needed a computer, they needed Office 97 installed, and they needed a printer directly connected to their computer. You could do that and it was happy. And if you are, I guess more of a traditional organization, then maybe that's still your business model, and that's a locked down network, and you just get those apps. But for a lot of the emerging tech-based companies, I as an IT person, I don't know what everybody does in my organization. It's impossible, and I'm sure a lot of people are in the same situation. So if you don't completely filter the internet, and you don't stop them from trying to new freeware applications or Linux-based systems, we have to give them the ability to sort of play and reinvent, which is one of our company's sort of buzzwords. For a business to succeed, you've got to give your just like Google has, they gave their engineers room to play and test things for 20% of their time, and stuff like Gmail appears. So I think shadow IT, the people will always find the right tools. So it's just being, I guess, aware of them, monitoring what's happening, and embracing, because you can't stop them. Because back in the day, the only internet connection that came into the office was the one that you provided. Now they probably get some days faster speed tethering to their own phones than what our cable provider might be able to provide.
No, I hope not. We have a 10 gig plan.
Or they could just walk around the corner and get unfiltered access to everything.
Yeah.
So, and if you're going to be draconian like that, then your staff are going to be annoyed and walk off. So I think any business that is going to develop and move forwards has to embrace shadow IT. And I guess the shadow IT is just I don't really like the word shadow IT.
Yeah, I hate it almost as much as I hate the word cloud.
Yeah,
That was something I was going to bring up. Shadow IT is like this guy or woman sitting in a room in a marketing team. We need to scare the piss out of network admins, and CSOs and CXOs, and legal departments need to be horribly afraid of what their employees are doing. Everyone's afraid of the shadow. So perfect terminology to really have this conversation going now for 6 or 7 years. Let's get real about this. The ground has changed under everyone's feet. We know that. And depending on your corporate culture and the type of org you're in, if you're in a .gov and you're pulling shadow IT shtick, you probably have a problem, as an IT department person, if users are pulling that. And it may be more than you're just not providing good services. It may be, holy crap, we just leaked a whole bunch of social security numbers, and that's really, really bad. But if you're a startup, don't think of it as shadow IT. Call it something in your head like spotlight on the next thing I'm doing, because that's really what it's going to be. And Tim's example of Slack is perfect. I used to tell users at the last place I worked, we have Google Hangouts, and we have WebEx, and we have God knows how many other tools for sending our voice outside. How many more do we need? Like, we don't need yet another outside voice, and I will own up to this, and if my buddy Jim is listening, I said it about 30 minutes before we got on this session in Slack. Man, I love Slack now. Like, really. So yeah, don't bother hitting me up on Hangouts anymore. I learned my lesson from my users.
Yeah, I mean, I know, at least for us, and it's one of those weird actual kind of enterprise to consumer crossovers. You know, it's all of us, we're on Slack. We don't text each other. We don't WhatsApp or Telegram or anything. You know, at least in the tech community, Slack's undergone this really interesting transformation from being a paid business product for teams that need the compliance and the SSO and the archiving to, you know, just random groups of friends and meetup groups and such, spinning up a free Slack. It, you know, normally goes the other way. And, you know, that's kind of the Google Apps success story to begin with, of consumer crossing over to enterprise. It's one of the first times I've seen enterprise cross back into consumer. So we've got another from Dave Jackson again. It's not shadow IT as much as it's crowdsourced IT.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
It's
That's a much better branding, that is.
Yes, that's far less fear-invoking. That's much better. So.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I hear like shadow IT, I always imagine the stereotypical like hacker stock photo, like the guy in the balaclava with gloves, sat intently typing in a laptop.
Big bushy beard,
your beard.
ponytail.
Yes. If you combine my hair and your beard, that is shadow IT. And oh yeah, by the way, just Steve said.
I'll zoom in a little bit. I got this one. You guys should tell us in the comments also if you like this beard better or this one. I can rock them both, so just tell me.
I don't know. I think the second one is encroaching on Tim a bit, but you know, sorry, not Tim, on Colin a bit, but yeah, they're separated at birth. So, which reminds me, Colin, are you gonna trim that thing anytime soon, or is that like fully automated now?
Right here, right now?
No, I need to have together a beard automation robot where I can just stick my head in a hole and it will I think that's the only way forwards.
So David says the first beard is too big for you.
This one's a smaller beard, I think. Oh, you mean on the sides?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we can sit around for another half hour and compare our beards. But another good question. Thanks, Josh, for this. After you've identified shadow IT, in the times when you do need to say no, when you do need to put your foot down, how do you handle that? How do you communicate that? Do you get executive backing? Do you do it on your own? Because you can't always say yes, right?
No.
Yeah, that's true.
And you do need to get HR executive backing, because if you're turning, and I've turned things off, and I have, you know, made sure that, you know, you have your line manager and an HR and a senior executive's support and understanding, because, you know, if you do...
And legal sometimes.
Yeah, and legal, depending on what you're turning off and what you might be denying access to. Because if you end up with, you know, an angry group of people with pitchforks at your door, you need to, you know, have somewhere to direct them and have that, you know, corporate level support in backing up your decisions. The things that we've turned off have been mostly not noticed, maybe by 2 or 3 users, and the others, you know, completely understood, and, you know, they moved on with a bit of re-education, you know, a bit of additional training of how to use, you know, existing approved products and services they were able to carry on.
Yeah, I mean, I know at least one of the things I noticed personally was just the duplication of services as well. You know, you have the one enterprise-approved file sharing software, and then the marketing team needs to work with video people, and the video people like this other weird third-party service, and then some of the tech guys like Dropbox, so they just install Dropbox and create an account. And you end up with this sprawl where, you know, some of it's free, but then you're paying sometimes for like 2 or 3 of the identical services.
I think the problem is there's no one service that does everything, and there'll be one group of people prefer this, another group prefer that. another group like this, because it also ties into something else. And I think there's very much the problem or the case of people thinking that IT can do everything. You take on a service and then they'll say, oh, can it also do this? It's like, no, it can't do that. Well, why can't it do that? And I guess you've always had to manage, end user expectation, and working within the confines of the laws of physics. We have, I guess, 3 different project management apps that may be utilized. Some people just like to use a spreadsheet, others want to use Trello, others want to use, is it Answer? Is it Answer?
Asana.
Yeah, I'm never going to pronounce it.
I just blame the accent.
Yeah.
So,
Asana.
yeah,
Go ahead.
it's a really good question. Like, how do you effectively say, no, you can't have that object that's shiny that you've been drooling over? And one thing I like to clearly remind IT people is these are not your kids. And I don't have kids, so for me it's like these are not my niece and nephew. I should not dumb it down for them. That is one of the most insulting things you can do, and it's one of the surefire methods of making sure they do not accept whatever answer you give them as to why they can't have new shiny thing. So keep that in mind first and foremost. One great example from my past with this has been your effort is very, very important, and the tool you picked, no one can use the output of your effort anymore. So it's like the work never got done. Like, if you can make it so we can use the output of your effort, great. Nobody will care then. Another one is the blatant, hey, that big security exploit thing we saw in the news last week? Well, guess what product you selected yesterday that's affected by it? So why don't we revisit this when they are no longer affected by Heartbleed, whatever other long, funny names came after that one, to the one from 2 days ago, whatever it is. And quite frankly, another one is, no one here knows how to use this thing but you. So when you go on vacation, we can't do any work. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah. We've come across that. But one way that we do accept some of the the shadowy cloud sourced IT services is ensuring that they do have two-step verification enabled. And if they don't have two-step verification, and they don't have any sort of centralized management that we as administrators can at least have some I guess keyhole look at what's being done with the accounts on that service, then we have to say no, it can't be used. But thankfully most of the new services are all being built with even if it starts as a consumer service, it always seems to want to have an enterprise focus, because of course that's where the money and the buyout option comes from. But they're having two-step verification built in. And a lot of it is just always Google Apps authentication, so it's not like users have to have an additional app installed.
Yeah, I mean, single sign-on in my mind is just the best thing since sliced bread. Mine as well. Well, we go dark here again. I blame the very fancy video conference provider that's running this room that I won't name. Again, how many people does it take, IT people does it take to fix a camera?
You tell me.
Well, I got a variation. How many hipster IT people does it take to change a light bulb? It's an obscure number. You wouldn't have heard of it.
Ha! Yep. I actually heard that one before, though. So, some good questions about driving adoption. It's with a lot of these platforms that we select, that we commit to, you really don't get the full value out of them unless everyone's onboarded and everyone's using it. What does your rollout and education and adoption process look like? Let's start with you, Justine.
Sorry, I was distracted by this. Can you repeat that?
Sorry, I don't mean to do this while you're troubleshooting. So new services,
yes.
When you guys roll them out, how do you do comms, how do you do education, and how do you ensure adoption?
Cool. So when we're rolling out anything new, we tried to sort of identify the different groups that we would want to roll it out to, whether it would be the whole company or whether it's specific departments. And we don't typically do it all at once, especially if it's like going to be a huge workflow change for people. So we'll try to have meetings with the smaller departments or divisions or teams or whatever they are in your company. My team, we all take part in training, so one of the things that we would do is create a deck, whatever it may be, Keynote, PowerPoint, Google Slides, and we'll just try to make sure that we give the same training to everyone, however it's easier for people. We find that not everyone likes to sign up for a meeting and come in person and show up. So we'll try to do some videos, or at least we've been trying to. They're a little time intensive in order to make them, but it's one thing that we can kind of do, especially for our international folks, that we can't physically meet with them.
Yeah, we've done I've tried almost exactly the same thing with, sit-down meetings on, emailed, the office, I'll be in so-and-so meeting room from 10 till 12 and then from 4 till 6. I'll, come and book a meeting and I'll show you how to use the software. And you just spend 4 hours alone.
Yep, been there before.
But yeah, we do those small trials, to see, we pick, strategic users that we know are very good at understanding technology and also very good at giving us constructive feedback, and are very good at breaking stuff as well.
Oh yeah, my users are incredible about that.
And then we'll use their feedback to create a guide, and we have done some videos. But I've learned to make the guides as bullet point and as factual as possible, and also put in
Pictures.
I was about to say that so many screenshots. Everything has to be screenshotted and annotated because they won't look at words, but they'll look at pictures, and they just seem to be a lot easier to scroll through and process.
Absolutely. Dave, I know your last job, you're responsible for what? I think it was 100,000. Even more than that. So, you were doing service production at a scale that we're not even used to. At that scale, what was your secret sauce?
For change and getting people ready for it, it was a lot of drinking scotch and kind of.
For them or you?
Yeah, for me. For both. So what we did is we kind of we took the best elements that we saw and that I saw with other organizations' training recommendations. So when we were doing our Google migration, one of the things they said was, hey, have champions, make them feel empowered. And that was great. And I still try to repeat that on some level today. But one thing I added as a twist to that is, don't just find your best, your brightest, your smartest, most pliable, flexible, easy to change ninjas. Find your Ben Stein DMV employee that does not deal with change well and include them in that first pilot group. Find 5 of them. So you should have like 20, change ninjas and 5 Ben Steins. No offense to Mr. Stein. And you will find that when you get those 5 low change adopting people on board, you're definitely doing very well. Another thing that I would suggest is do not flood them all at once with too much change. There comes a point where you don't see what's going on anymore as a user of a new service or as a change service. All you can really do is track a few things at once, master those, and the size of those things change. But you can't just say, here's everything sometimes. With an email migration like to Google Apps or O365, you kind of have to on some level. That's a big bang deployment. But changing a workflow that has some automation, if you're using like a SOA architecture or an agile strategy for rolling it out, you can do piece by piece by piece and train people as those pieces change. They'll be far more comfortable as long as it's not a 2-year thing. If you do it over 3 months, then it's probably fine.
3 months, I think, is the time to complete those projects.
3 months or less.
From one VPN client provider to another one that had a 2-step verification process in it. And we did that in stages, and we gave people strict deadlines and reminders of when the old service was going to be disconnected, and they had to make sure that their laptop had the newer client on it. And a lot of that process was automated all through deployment technology, and then we just had to had a report of the failures, and then just had to manually mop up. But yeah, 3 months I would say is the perfect time to get that stuff done.
Now, when you guys do those deployments, those big rollouts, especially when you're not introducing a new service but replacing one service with another, how detailed do you communicate the why to your users? Is it this is better, or management said so, or do you guys go deeper into the here's why we're inconveniencing you for a day?
Depends on the reason, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if we're making a switch from one particular service to another and it's a security reason, then I definitely go out of my way to make sure people realize that that's why we're doing it. What about you, Colin?
Yeah, ours was the need to have better updated technology that would easily do two-step verification and allow us to, being a global company, allow us to eventually roll out local VPN endpoints, so that if you're in San Francisco, you didn't have to VPN back into the London data center to then get a file off of your local San Francisco server. You could VPN in directly, and that's the end model that with some other technologies that we're working towards. Because unfortunately, not all of our stuff is in the cloud, but that's where we want to be, and we're planning to be if all of the other services that we use can be utilized in the cloud.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in this interesting spot personally where the first part of my career I spent a lot of time in data centers, racking and stacking and building out new data centers, and part of me is so nostalgic for like walking in and just looking at blinky lights and having that power of being in the data center. But at the same point, now Better Cloud has no data centers. We have no on-premise gear, fully in GCP, and it's a little bit of kind of an ego-draining moment. But at one point, I had to admit that Google can run a data center better than I ever could. And as much as I miss having some of that control and swiping my badge and opening up that big heavy door and hearing the whoosh of fans, I also at scale, all of these big cloud providers can run data centers better than we can at our scale. And we have certain concerns that just don't exist anymore. It's our DR plan is basically work from home. We don't have data centers to lose. We have backup strategies. Going back to your comment earlier, Dave, during IT orientation, I tell all of my users my backup strategy. 3 copies, 2 locations, 1 bottle of whiskey for when it all goes wrong. And that, oh, come on, you've never heard that before?
No, I haven't. I've heard 3 copies and you don't know where I'm hiding. So.
And that 2 locations generally, for very critical data means 2 separate cloud providers. I trust these guys, but I still don't trust them entirely. They do better than I can, but if you guys know me, you know that I don't trust myself at all. What sort of redundancy do you guys have built into specifically your cloud services, and how much have you guys missed giving up some of your on-prem resources?
Justine, you're probably more in the cloud than I am.
I'm just floating in the cloud. Well, my team actually doesn't handle any of the website stuff, which is all on AWS, but in terms of all of our cloud software, I mean, I can't say that I have made an exact copy of everyone's like Dropbox files and put it somewhere else, because that seems silly. I spend a lot of time reading contracts and working with legal departments and trying to make sure that they have contingencies put into their products that will support us if the inevitable happens.
Yeah, I mean, SLAs are your best friend, right? SLAs with financial penalties, because SLAs without don't mean anything.
Right, yeah.
True.
What about you, Dave?
So here's where I'm going to put on big org, little org hat for a second. So if you're lucky enough or unlucky enough to work in a massively big bureaucracy organization like I have in the past, make sure you identify and become buddy-buddy with the corporate risk management team and get them to figure out what level of redundancy and disaster recovery you need for those services. Have them give it a score, whether it's a 1 through 10 and it's Richter, or it's just simple slide, or very low risk, do what you want, or we need like lots of redundancy. If those are your indicators, that's great. So as an example, last gig, we used Backupify because if it was only going to impact you, you only need one backup copy. That's it. If it's something that's going to impact a department, a team in a department or higher, we're going to back it up for you in Google Drive, but it's on you to make sure it's also someplace else. You know the criticality of your work, and if you don't, you won't be doing that work for long, is kind of the sense. Other places I've worked have been, well, we don't want to bother people with having to make a copy, so you figure it out. And we did. In those cases, we actually, and this is going back to 2009, I had a parallel Google Apps domain just in case the primary one got hijacked. And creating custom synchronicity between those was a nightmare, and it never worked 100%, but that was the absolute nightmare scenario. Someone got into all of our systems and hijacked everything, and we had no method for recovery. Do you need that level of paranoia? Probably not. The other thing I would suggest, small, nimble, agile orgs, whether you're a startup or just a small org, don't make any assumptions without talking to the person who signed your check. You may know what that level of criticality is, you may have budget for it, but it never hurts to ask somebody else that makes the decision about signing your paycheck. Should we allocate these N thousands of dollars to backing up the fill-in-the-blank marketing photos from this event or whatever it is? Or should we keep that money pocketed because we're a small org? So that's my advice. Ask around, get a sense for what other people want to see.
I know at least I floated around to some consulting for a while, and I consulted with this one wedding photographer who shot this wedding down in Bermuda, and the airline lost her camera bag. She checked it, don't ask me why, had both of her copies in the same bag, and had to pay about $120,000 to fly the entire wedding party back to Bermuda to take the pictures again. And she never actually realized what she was doing wrong or what the impact was until it blew up in her face once.
Yeah.
And then we had a really great conversation where I had basically unlimited budget to do a great backup strategy for her. But sometimes, unfortunately, first off, you're not really talking about a backup strategy. You're talking about a restore strategy. Because if you don't test your restores, your backups are useless. That's an old IT adage. It's at other companies in past lives, have you guys ever had incidents that have been kind of the kick in the ass to actually do proper backups?
I've had an incident where having a backup justified the expense of having the backup that until that point we hadn't really used. And when I sell any service like that to, to finance, to management, we are taking out an insurance policy, which we, just like a car insurance policy or a house insurance policy. Cloud services are great. Google hardly ever goes down. I think it was either last year or the year before, Drive went down. There was an intermittent access, and it did affect a large number of our users. Even though globally it was a small percentage of Drive users, it was a higher percentage of ours. But because we had all of their data saved in a separate system that they could still access, and even if Google OAuth went down, I can still access. They were able to download their files and fire up Word that we still give them, and they were able to carry on working and share those presentations and documents with people.
Yeah. I mean, not only just on the storage side, but on just connectivity in general too. I mean, a couple weeks ago in Atlanta, we have almost 100 developers that we pay well and that do lots of work fully cloud. And we got a backup WAN connection. We have enterprise fiber as our primary and got business class cable as our backup. Mm-hmm. And we lost our primary connection for about 4 minutes during the day. But by my math, even that 4 minutes paying for that connection for the last 18 months paid for itself in those 4 minutes for the business disruption. Yeah. And I was like a boy who got an A+ on his report card, going to my CFO, being like, listen, I know we've been paying for this for 18 months and we've never needed it, but this just sincerely saved our ass. And in general, I think with the whole cloud shift, if you ran on-prem email and on-prem storage, you lose all of your WAN. You can't do email, but you can still kind of work locally. You still have your mailboxes cached, all of that stuff. At least for us, without a single server in our office, we lose primary and backup WAN. We're sending everyone home. There is no other option. And that's been such a shift for us.
But it's not just those offices that are fragile and delicate. It's also those single data centers. Mm. A company that we used to use in the UK, for some reason I'm still on their alert mailing list, so I get all of their alerts.
I remember seeing you post this a couple days ago.
Yeah, one of England's largest data centers lost power. And I went to the data center site, and and they said, "Oh, we've got a generator, we've got dual backup, we've got all this other power, but I think they got struck by lightning, and it blew stuff up."
Did they get struck by lightning, or was the data center just trying to leave the EU?
I'm not sure. It was a couple of weeks early. Maybe they knew what was going to happen. And I've had a data center lose power and been we were a small company at the time, and it was a catastrophe for us. But it was, that data center losing power took out a third of Europe's internet traffic. So you do have to have those 3 copies, or is it 2 copies? So if you do put all your stuff in AWS or another cloud provider, Google Compute Engine, at least you know that it is spread over multiple data centers. You can't be safe by saying, my company's safe because I put all my stuff in a data center and the data center's got dual power, but it's still a single building with, probably 1 road going into it and 1 power station, 2 maybe if they're lucky powering it.
Yeah, I mean, every time AWS US East 1 goes down, you see if people actually do ops or they don't do ops. The number of, US East 1 goes down and like 25% of the web goes down with it. It happens like once a year now. It's a pattern or an anti-pattern that's hilarious to me.
Well, the servers have got to be rebooted at some stage, haven't they, to play all the patches?
Yeah, and not only like fiber loss, but James just reminded us of not just power loss, but fiber cuts. Overzealous construction crews can really ruin your day.
Oh yeah, been there.
So anyways, it looks like we're actually already almost at the top of the hour.
Yeah. Any more final questions?
Yeah. What do you guys think was your biggest takeaway from the sessions? What do you want to hammer home to our audience?
Oh, that's a good one.
I was going to try and bring up the list of all the sessions again so I could see the names. I like to attend, and watch all these webinars to remind myself of the good practices that we should be doing, are doing.
Welcome to the Dave Show.
Keep talking.
And get, I guess, verification that we're doing the right stuff and thinking about the right things, because other people are doing the similar stuff. So if you're not in, a local Slack channel / beer drinking, burger meeting group, if you haven't joined, a Google Apps user group in your own town, and you're sort of isolated physically from your other colleagues, you can't, brainstorm face-to-face through a video conferencing. I think the webinars are very good, and myself and my team, I make sure that my IT guys have a lot of time to watch webinars. And I say you might not learn anything new, but it'll, you reinforce. And one of the best webinars I ever saw was from Fortinet, an engineer, one of the top router, security guys, saying his biggest security fear was endpoints and laptop patching, rather than having the latest greatest firewall, which they were a company that were doing. His biggest fear was patching, and that's what one of our primary focuses is. So,
Yeah.
what would I take away? Automate to improve. Make sure security is up to date. Make sure you're compliant. You're not leaking data through, whether it's having virtual encrypt your email and look for keywords being sent out, making sure you've got backups, and keeping an open mind on shadow IT, crowdsourced IT. Crowdsourced, not cloud source.
Oh yeah.
Crowdsourced cloud IT.
There you go. What about you, Justine?
I mean, my takeaway is definitely to take a look at ways to help automate some of the sillier tasks that we really don't need to be doing manually, just in order to make more time to focus on those bigger projects that we really need to be working on, and making sure that we're secure and tight.
I think automation will grow the business rather than reduce your team, because if the business grows, your job's not going to disappear. You're going to end up needing more staff to support more people. So.
Yeah, you're giving yourself opportunities to be able to work on the projects you actually really want to work on.
Yeah, I mean, and actually this was the one thing that I wanted to touch on and completely forgot, is, I've noticed that there's this positive feedback loop of you automate stuff, you save time, you can automate more, you save more time. I just read the Google Site Reliability Engineering book, and they talk about toil, about these manual actions that are really easy to screw up as a human, that are annoying and just the least pleasurable parts of your job. The more that you can automate the toil, the more that you can automate the toil, and you just go around in this circle until you're a creative human leader doing customer service and technology advice and all of that. Your automations kind of run the operational side day to day.
Because human interaction always seems to lead to errors, whether they're just the wrong button clicked or a misspelling of something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guilty of it.
If you have that process from taking new hire, from recruitment saying yes to account being created, if IT doesn't have to really be involved in manually do that step, whether you're putting them into Active Directory or Salesforce or any other program that they've got to be added to, if somebody only types their name in once and they're reading it off of their CV or their resume or their driving license passport, and it passes all the way through to the very end, then you those errors, especially on a large scale, if you all of Dave's previous users, if you're onboarding or secondary schools or high schools, that's what they do, a lot of automation where I used to work.
Yep. What do you think, Dave?
So I'm going to be me again, and very blunt and very honest. My big takeaways were in reading between the lines on some of this stuff. So managers with budgetary concerns pay close attention. It is far easier to ask for money to automate than it is for headcount.
Yeah.
Big lesson there. You don't have to give automation dental. Ooh. Automation never takes time off because their kid has a play. Automation will enable you to take time off because your kid has a play. So these are really critical life enhancements for you and stress reducers. You don't have to go and ask for things or funds or whatever as frequently as you would if you automate. Another one is build error catching into your automation. Like, I knew that before, our conversation kind of reiterated it. And the other one is, unfortunately, automation will not mean I'm out of work hanging out on a beach. It just means I'm going to have more time to do more work automating other things so I can't go to the beach. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think with that, we'll throw it back to Scott. I know there were a couple attendee questions, when the prizes are being given out, all that stuff.
Yeah, so we'll have the giveaways given out within the next week. I wanted to launch a quick poll question. This one is, I believe, by Justine's request. So if you're in the audience, could you
Oh no,
please
I
take a
think
minute
that
to
was
answer
Colin.
Yeah, it's Colin.
this? Okay, it's a really close race here. Let's see, literally 50-50.
What about goatees? Come on. There's a slice of us that have goatees.
I know, I should have had an other option. Let's see, up,
Too much
got
work,
one
Dave.
falling away. And
All right, they're rad.
beards are rad.
Oh,
Beards
All
are rad. All right, well, with that, I just want to say thank you to everybody that attended Cloud IT Live. I especially want to thank Colin, Justine, Dave, and Tim, and definitely want to thank our sponsors, Smartsheet, Virtru, and Spanning. So that's a wrap, and thank you all very much. See you.
Next time.
Well,